You got to reinvent yourself. You got to be comfortable with the discomfort, and you got to look for where the opportunities are. Bruce knew the world didn't need another Born in the USA, Down on Your Luck folk song. It needed to be an anthem. And my transition out of the wirehouses into RIA, that's what I'm trying to do. Let's make this an anthem.
Welcome to the Active Advisor Podcast, brought to you by Harbor Capital. Join us as we learn from pros who have helped thousands of investors live better lives. I'm Brian Moore, and I'll be chatting with some of the brightest minds in the financial advisory business, bringing you insights on practice management and investment research that works for advisors and their clients. Joining me today on this episode of the Active Advisor Podcast is Matt Zeigler. Matt is the Managing Director and Private Wealth Advisor at Sunpointe Investments, where he assists clients in creating, aligning, and managing their financial plans and investment strategies. Before joining Sunpointe, Matt served as a Senior Financial Advisor at Bank of America Merrill Lynch, where he gained a profound perspective on financial planning and investment strategies for individuals, businesses, and nonprofits. Matt's unique approach to finance is based on the belief that while finance may be complex, it doesn't have to be complicated. He emphasizes the importance of connecting with people on a personal level, understanding their stories, and working together to build customized plans. In his own words, it always starts by connecting with people first. With a degree in music from the University of Hartford, Matt brings his own unique and creative perspective to the industry. Welcome, Matt, and thank you for joining us.
Thanks so much for having me, Brian.
So we're going to try not to make this whole conversation about music, but I'm sure we'll definitely go there a couple point in times throughout, but I'm not going to make any promises.
I'm going to promise right now, and just in the event that people don't know this, I hear, Brian, you're a slight music nerd. Can you reveal this to the audience?
I am a little bit, yeah. It's one of those mediums that I think kind of can get you through a lot of points in life, but also help you kind of enjoy life.
Amen to that. So I am going to attempt, because I don't think, do your notes get shared publicly? You are pulling music quotes out of the air like me, I feel like. Do you get to share those publicly, or are those?
Marketing is working on that. They're working on that.
All right. So from one music nerd to another, I know we're sharing this conversation with everybody, but my vow to you is that any question you ask today, I am going to do my darndest to answer with a music reference, just because that makes it more fun. And if we don't have a playlist by the end of this one, I've thrown away all my worthwhile mixtape knowledge from the years.
Oh, there you go. I like the challenge. I love how this is starting out.
I got a pen. I got a pad. We're playlisting. Fire.
Okay. What's the first memory you have related to money or investing?
As promised. Okay. Dire Straits, Money for Nothing. This isn't the first memory, but you're familiar. Dire Straits, right?
Oh, yeah.
Okay. So I'm MTV generation. And that's not to say TV was my babysitter, but it is to say a lot of, 80s pop radio and TV was part of my life. So that ain't working. That's the way you do it. Get your money for nothing and your chicks for free. Being a rock star just seems so cool when you're a kid. Who wouldn't want to get their money for nothing? That sounds so awesome. Also sounds like a free lunch thing. We'll tie this back to markets eventually. So I'm like probably 17 years old, playing in bands with professional musicians. So all older guys, and we're doing like corporate events and weddings. So we're getting paid. My friends are flipping burgers, and I'm getting paid a couple $100s on the weekend for just showing up and doing this stuff. But then I have my bands with my friends, and that's like, there's a bunch of us doing all ages shows and stuff. We're barely getting paid. And so around 16 or 17 in Dire Straits, I'm looking at you indirectly here. I'm like, how do I get my band paid? I want to get my friends paid too. I know how to get paid with the old guys. I want to get paid with the young guys. And so I'm doing all the things I've learned. I'm sending out the kits. I'm sending out the contracts. And this guy calls me up and he's like, okay, we want to book you for this thing. We get to compensation. And he basically tells me to pound sand. Oof. In more colorful terms. It did involve a nice drawn out situation of like, is there a window in the room you're in? There is. Why? Can you go look out that window? Why would I do that? Oh, maybe you should slam your head in that window. And I was like, again, I'm like 17 years old, but all of a sudden this lesson became so focused in my brain, and I've never let go of that story. Not the chip on my shoulder version of it, but this idea. You have to create more value than you cost.
True.
There's no way my 17-year-old friends and friends band is going to like put 1,000 people in an all ages club. And it's not like there's a bar in the all ages club where you're going to make up money on drink sales and stuff like that. I was walking into the wrong situation without understanding the terms for how to be successful in that spot. And I had to learn that lesson. by getting like thumped upside the head with what this person said, but there's no such thing as money for nothing and your chicks for free. You got to work for this stuff, even if you think you're looking at the TV and that's the way you do it. So that first money lesson, I think, is that first profound experience of saying, I know people get paid for this, but then seeing you still have to create more value than you cost.
No, it's an excellent point. I think that is something that music so aptly does as well. But it definitely kind of resonates throughout almost every story that we've heard from everybody. You have to add value.
You got to add value.
Yeah. At the end of the day, that's what it's all about. So we're definitely starting off kind of on the music knowledge and kind of quotes, which I absolutely love. And it's definitely right up my alley. One of the things I love doing is when speaking with different advisors is hearing their paths and what they bring unique to the business. And I think I'm definitely partial to yours because music plays such a big part in my life as well, even though I couldn't carry a tune in a bucket or whatever wheelbarrow. But I'd love to hear kind of, you have this background growing up, music oriented, playing in bands. You go to college, you graduate from the University of Hartford with a degree of music. And then now here we are, fast forward to today, you're at your current position at Sunpointe. That seems like a really interesting journey. And I'm sure there's obviously been ups and downs along the way. Would love to hear your story about that path that you've taken. And it could be the road less traveled, could be I-95. Who knows? I'm sure it included a little bit of both.
A lot of time on I-95 and a lot of time with the road less traveled. That's a whole separate thing about how I was raised by two generations of English teachers in my family and was introduced to literary criticism, probably at too young of age, to the middle school teachers who handed out Shakespeare or Robert Frost's poem. You aren't ready for what hit you with my grandma knowledge. So, all right, Journey, not going to do a Journey song.
Oh, come on. Don't stop believing in it.
No disrespect. We can add that. I'm going to add that to the list. Why not? Don't Stop Believing. We can fit them all in here. I want to go Born in the USA on this one.
Okay.
And I got to ask you this question. Are you familiar with the pre-1984 version? Do you know the demo of Born in the USA?
No, I don't actually. Never heard. I didn't even know that existed. I'm sure it did, but in some sense, but yes.
You're a Bruce fan, I imagine.
Yes.
Okay. Nebraska. When you think of Nebraska, do you think of Born in the USA?
I know he spent some time out there, and that I think that was it the title of his original album?
One of the first albums. It's like, that's the one with Atlantic City and the Chicken Man and all that stuff on it. Folksy, dark. He writes that like basically in a bedroom in a house. Really cool thing on where he wrote it. But so he writes Born in the USA for Nebraska for this dark, folksy album. And I love knowing that about this song because it's this idea that it ends up getting cut. He's like, this isn't good enough for this thing. It was too much of a folksy downer, basically, even for Nebraska, which is a folksy downer of an album. Still probably one of my favorites, if not my favorite, but one of my favorites. But it's not until 1984 when it's ready. And man, you put those two things on back to back and you hear the progression over those 2 years of the famous line, you put the blues in the verses, you put the gospel in the chorus. Like, he needed to figure that thing out. And so I'm going to connect this back to Born in the USA here too. So my story, I'm a music kid. I learned the music business by being involved with older musicians and people. I end up in this band. And when you're a kid in a bar, you can't really go hang out in the bar. So you spend a lot of time in back rooms. And that means you're reading contracts and you're reading riders and you're looking at how stuff goes together. And you're asking questions like, why does this instrument go in the LLC as a holding? And why is this one owned by the bass player? These are real questions. It was an MBA just as a 17-year-old playing corporate events and weddings and stuff like that. And so I wanted to be a producer. I wanted to be more than this thing. And I ultimately go to college for this. I ultimately spend time in recording studios. And I did all the things to make the artwork, not the artwork. I did all the things to make the artwork. And I don't know if you can relate to this. Did you ever love something and just kind of burn out? Have you ever experienced this?
Yeah. I mean, I think that happens to everybody in kind of one way or another, but it can take time to experience it and realize it. Yes.
Figuring out that the thing you love, once you turn it into a sole source of income or a full-time job, and this hits me like a couple years after college, so I'm recording the 18th terrible local rapper demo in between like the real sessions that I want to do. And this guy just like broke my heart with a couple of lines where I was just like, one of those days you just walk out of work and you're like, I don't know if I'm ever going back. Yeah, the line specifically was something about shoot you in the calves like Cleveland. And I was like, he had some other good lines, but that one I was just, man, there's so many problems inside of this. And I don't want to teach you anymore. I just want to walk away. So I literally go and get a job this is 2006, 7-ish as a part-time teller in a bank, because I was just like, get me as far away from this as possible. And people kept telling me, you're good at business. You should be doing something with business. So I get a part-time teller in a bank job. And spoiler alert, I'm not a good teller. Couldn't balance that drawer. Close, but really was not good at that. But I saw this guy coming in and out, and he was the only person in that bank. He wasn't the only person who looked like happy, but I didn't want to be one of the other personal bankers. I didn't want to be the bank manager. This guy looked like he was actually having fun, and people were excited to see him. And what's that guy do? He's a financial advisor. Oh, that sounds interesting. How do I get that job? That starts my long journey of part-time bank teller to full-time bank teller to then a bunch of consumer bank things while I begged people to figure out how to get this job. And then I could do that. Of course, because I have impeccable timing, I get my financial advisor hat, I get all my credentials and everything else right in the middle of, or actually right before the start of that little thing called the global financial crisis. So that's the beginning of my career. And I say this to other advisors all the time coming into this. One of the best things that can happen is you get unlucky at the beginning. I think that's a common investing thing. If you get lucky first and you think you're smart, so help you God.
Yeah, it's the worst.
It's the worst. So the experience of my first few years in the business, and like I started Bank of America, I leave and go to Merrill Lynch only to have the whole crisis blow up and then be returned into the loving arms of Bank of America, like inside of a calendar year.
That was really a year that I think it aged a lot of people. It doesn't matter where you were at in the business, but it also, I think kind of ingrained itself in those of us who were trading and kind of getting started at that point in time, that things aren't always as good as they seem and things can get worse. And I think that post that period, I see the new people who've kind of come into the business and you see kind of, they're always this optimism about them and this kind of, oh, well, the Fed will do this, the Fed will do that. And so I know I still talk to a lot of my trader friends. They're always like, yeah, everybody thinks they have this Fed put. And you're like, I've seen what the Fed can do sometimes. And it doesn't necessarily, I guess, to wrap this up, you need to become comfortable being uncomfortable, which is something that I tell my kids all the time. Don't let that change your thought process and how your vision and where you want to go. But also, most importantly, don't let that totally get you off track.
I love that so much because if you embrace being uncomfortable as the thing you're going to be comfortable with, if walking into an industry and then having like one of the greatest things that could have happened to me is I study for all these tests, I get all these, exams out of the way. They had us starting on CFP stuff right out of the gate. And then all of it's wrong.
Yeah.
And when you're looking at, like still remember in the middle of like 2009, grown man in a corner office in his mid to late 60s at his desk sobbing because he had, sold his in-laws Freddie or Fannie or something like that. And just being able to look at this institution, say, all this embedded knowledge is wrong, or maybe not wrong, but they didn't understand this. These people in these corner offices didn't actually see this thing coming. And there's all these clients who still need help. That was the intro to behavioral finance and trying to learn all that stuff. Kahneman, Tversky, and everything follows. That was the intro. I didn't know it yet. My now business partner, Michael Pompian, was out there writing books on behavioral finance. I start reading his stuff in the period following this. I go on this education bender to say, if all these people who are telling me how to be successful in the business just got the rug pulled out from them, and many struggled very deeply with that discomfort, how do I overcome that? And just to bring it back to this, Bruce, unborn in the USA, that Nebraska demo, he's still wrestling with it. He hasn't figured it out yet. And I think in that post-financial crisis period, all the way up through a few years ago when I decided to leave the big wirehouse thing, I had success in that, but I had to realize what else I wanted, what I wanted to do. And the biggest part of that journey was reconnecting with the artist side of me. I know we'll probably talk more about this too, but it's just this idea of you got to reinvent yourself. You got to be comfortable with the discomfort and you got to look for where the opportunities are. Bruce knew the world didn't need another Born in the USA, Down on Your Luck folk song. It needed to be an anthem. And my transition out of the wirehouses into RIA, that's what I'm trying to do. Let's make this an anthem.
You mentioned something that I think probably obviously behavioral finance has been around at some point in time prior to GFC, but I think it really started to develop more of a pronounced movement and following after that, because I think people were looking that what was expected and what was being done didn't work all the time. And so I think people had to kind of look at it and go, okay, where can we enhance upon this? And just like anything else, if you're playing in a football game on little known one on Sunday. If the first quarter doesn't go as planned and the first half doesn't go as planned, then you better start making changes and trying to enhance some areas. And so I think, in my opinion, behavioral finance was kind of a nice addition to financial planning in that respect. And so you brought it up, so I'm going to throw back to you. I'd love to hear kind of during this period, you're starting your career out, obviously very kind of traumatic or turmoil period. I guess what out of behavioral finance kind of called to you and led you kind of to Sunpointe?
So inside of that, and I'm continuing this one, so I'm still on the Bruce Springsteen
go
journey.
right ahead.
I'm still
Go
on the
ahead.
Bruce Springsteen journey kick with this. So pardon my not having a new song just yet, unless one comes to me in this. I forge a relationship with Michael Pompian, my now business partner, and a lot of that comes out of based on when you realize you're in a position. So you're working for a company. I'm not saying anything bad about my former employer. A lot of great people, a lot of great friends there still.
Of course.
But you're in a giant situation. And this is really important for any advisors, wirehouse people, broker-dealer people. The bigger the organization and the more stuff you deal with. That's just big. You're on a battleship. You're a contractor on the Death Star is the thing that I always like to reference, that scene from Clerks. And that's a choice. And that means when you're in a situation where people are saying, bring your whole self to work, and then you go to bring your whole self for work, and they're like, maybe leave some of that at home. And I realized I'm never going to retire at this place. So when am I going to leave? And COVID was like sort of the clock started turning faster. And I started really looking at my network and really looking out to people that I respected and started asking a lot of them for advice. And through the kindness of others and people like, again, Michael, that I'm now partnered with, that I reached out to, which that's a whole funny story for another day. But you start reaching out to people, you start tapping that network, and people start saying, and you start to figure out what you're made of and where those interests you want to take them. So for me, it was between hanging my own shingle or joining another big firm. And where I finally settled in was, I definitely don't want to be a part of a big firm. I definitely don't want to hang my own shingle, but I want small enough that something is still building, but big enough that the opportunity set is on the backside. I want to build something meaningful. I don't need a hit record, but I want to build something substantial. And Sunpointe was a firm that I developed relationships with a couple of people there. And when they would have questions, so they're at that time primarily family office driven, primarily investment driven, and lots and lots of academic research around behavioral finance. I would go to them when I had family office type questions. How do I track these private investments? How do I vet this stuff? They say this is how you do due diligence on this, but how do you really do due diligence on this? And I'd pepper them with those questions. And then likewise, they'd have a situation with a family member or somebody on a more financial planning side or a business owner. And they'd call me and they'd go, hey, Matt, what do you do when this hits your desk? And that friendship became an open exchange of information. And that turned into literally the day that I'm like, I got to call Mike and just say, help me think through this situation. He calls me and goes, your name came up 3 times in a meeting today. Why don't you just join our firm? I got to figure out how to build out this wealth management business owner segment so that I can connect the top end clients and the bottom end clients. So we can figure out how do we pass family office money down multiple generations, hang on to the values, but build the right values for the families who want to pass them back up. And I was like, I can build that division. Let's work together.
Nice. And it was just that easy, right?
It was just that easy. It was, it was one phone call, hung up, everybody at Merrill waved goodbye, sent me flowers and chocolates and only 1 or 2 nasty legal letters. And it was easy. Walk in the park.
Yeah, I'm sure. It had to be kind of, I guess, gratifying that somebody trusted you that much to build that kind of division and kind of complete that puzzle. If I can say it's a puzzle.
It's a puzzle.
Well, it is to a certain point. It is. We're definitely right. But would love to kind of circle back and what has this creative artistic side in you when people look at, say, you're sitting across from a person and you're listening to their story and it's not like going to the dentist, like you said, when people came and saw the financial advisor in the bank. Meanwhile, I'm definitely afraid of dentists, even at my size. But when you go see that advisor, people were happy to see them. So they obviously were doing something right. People were coming in there with concerns, questions, and leaving feeling satisfied that they got somebody that they trusted handling their life affairs, and B, that they got to receive the right answers or something that they felt comfortable with. Would love to hear kind of what do you believe that, your background is kind of, I guess, how has that helped you deliver in your own unique way that same kind of experience to your clients?
So there's 2 things I feel like I want to say inside of this one. The first is, I'm keeping on track with songs here. I want to go Rick Rubin. I want to go Johnny Cash. You Johnny Cash fan? You grew up in the right part of the country initially.
Of course. I was listening to Johnny Cash this morning.
No kidding. What were you listening to?
My ringtone is Ring of Fire, so I pretty much listen to Johnny Cash every day.
That is fantastic.
If I may be honest.
Do you really?
Yes. I'm a big Bakersfield Sound guy.
Oh, no
I don't know if you know what that is.
I know Bakersfield Sound. That's amazing.
Yeah.
All right. So I go back. Johnny Cash to me is I'm a kid with my parents' stack of 45s. And I have the moment of I'm playing Boy Named Sue because obviously, and I have the Shel Silverstein book. See prior reference to English teachers in the family. So it's like the Shel Silverstein books. Here's Johnny Cash singing Boy Named Sue. I am hooked from wee lad with my own record table. It was, I had Huey Lewis in the News. I had a Bon Jovi cassette, and I had Johnny Cash singing to me on 45s. But the song I want to take this in the direction of, because what you're talking about with the financial advisor client relationship and where that trust comes from, I want to jump all the way forward to my high school years and when he started to work with Rick Rubin and the American Records, that whole series. The Rick Rubin story, when he tells this, and he's told this in interviews, is basically, so first off, he has the realization that he wants to work with somebody above a certain caliber and restart their career. And Rick Rubin's ultimate gift, and highly, highly recommend his book that just came out. And I've been standing him for years. So we got a lot of history going back.
Don't stop now.
I will not stop now. I'm all about this recognition that he's getting. So he's literally sending. So first off, he figures out with Johnny Cash, he's like, how do I produce this? Do I need an orchestra? What do I need to do? Do I need arrangers? And the brilliant realization was, I'm just going to go meet him at the farm, hand him a guitar, and put a microphone in front of him and just press record. That's realization number one. Realization number two is Rick Rubin starts to understand that not only is that the essence of this guy, but so many of those songs from back in the day, Boy Named Sue, that's not his song. He didn't write those lyrics.
No.
He just reinterpreted them. So what Rubin starts to do, because he's got to sell records. So he thinks, I'm going to start sending him other songs that maybe he can reinterpret just like he used to do, but let's get him to reinterpret it in this new way. And Hurt by Nine Inch Nails is one of those songs that, again, never in a million years is Johnny Cash going to throw this on himself probably. But after multiple times of putting it on to CDs or tapes or whatever he's sending him, Johnny Cash is like, all right, I think there's something here. Johnny Cash takes this song, slows it down, takes all the industrial post-metal stuff out of it, and he just sings it with an acoustic guitar and that raw, rumbly voice of his. And all of a sudden now we have a song that's a devastating picture of loss, of why do we do the things to ourselves? Why is this here? Rick Rubin saw that tension, that polarity, that idea inside of this song, the difference between a 20-year-old singing it and like a 70-year-old or whatever he was at the time singing it. And he figured out a way to like unearth this whole layer of emotions on this advisor connection to all this. We're dot connectors. That's our job. That's what I see our job as. We're not producers, as Rick Rubin would say. We are reducers. We are looking for those points of connection to take something somebody doesn't understand and put it in a way in their terms so that they can express it. To take the Nine Inch Nails song, get it into Johnny Cash's head and hands, and then put it out on a record so a whole new generation of people can discover it. I don't think, or I would put this on the same level, connected back to investment too. How the heck does Buffett end up owning Apple after saying he's never going to own a tech stock for years? This is dot connection. This is reducing things to their essence and figuring out how to talk to people on a level that they go, okay, I'll try that because you just repackaged in a way that it connects in my gut. And for all the behavioral finance and all the other stuff that's out there, the human connection that we advisors have to identify that thing in people's guts and maybe introduce them to a new idea or extrapolate an expression out of them for what they want to do, whether that's retirement or a charitable foundation or whatever. And that's the most beautiful part of this job.
I like that. I mean, I think for sitting back listening and kind of hearing everything, because I think there's a big difference between listening and hearing. You basically can kind of listen or hear what somebody's saying and kind of look at it from a slightly different perspective and then help them draw kind of not only conclusions, but a roadmap onto where they need to be.
Hey, it sounds like a financial plan.
There you go. See, it's just that easy.
It's just that easy. Or a producer's job. I remember sitting in the producer's seat when I had my recording studio days. And a lot of that was it was just project management. It was, okay, here's the artist, here's the song. We're going to figure out what we're going to do. Oh, they said, I want it to sound this way, or wouldn't strings be cool on this? Okay, yeah, I can write a string arrangement. Yeah, I went to college with a couple of kids who could play this part. Let me call them up. And that whole project management to execution of the expression, that's the producer's role. And that's why I think Rubin is such an important character, if you will, for anybody who's in the advisor seat, because it's that listening, hearing, interpreting, execution. That's what people hire us for.
Agreed. No, without a doubt. I think it's I would put it in kind of my Southern terms as you're helping the journey. You're helping, along the way. And I think with that expectation of help comes a lot of trust.
Absolutely. Earned trust over time. It can't be faked trust. And that, again, ties back to the financial crisis experience.
Yeah, no, without a doubt. That experience is going to resonate. It's going to be, hopefully it's not our Great Depression experience, but many at the time were talking about it, and there were similarities drawn. But I think out of that pain and turmoil came a lot of great things. And it definitely seems like kind of at some point really looked at the business and decided to take it a different way and just kind of changed the degree on kind of the trajectory of a lot of people's lives.
That's the idea, especially if we can take it across generations too.
Excellent. We haven't come up with a song for a little bit, and a couple have been going through my head.
So I had a Taylor Swift song stuck in my head.
Oh, all the time. Yeah. They're a constant, shake it off.
Oh, okay. That era. Do you remember the We Are Never Ever Getting Back Together song?
Yes.
Okay. Do you know who she wrote that song with?
No.
So We Are Never Ever Getting Back Together to me, this is a huge turning point in her career. And I'm going to try to obviously you already know these songs, but this is the stuff that makes it so much more interesting to me. That's the first song she does with this guy, Max Martin. And if you've never heard that name, Max Martin is the guy who he's basically been on the charts almost my entire life. And even if I don't always love a song at first blush, thanks to the internet, you go on and you look to see who the songwriting credits are, and Max Martin is everywhere. And I think what happened was, so Taylor Swift starts off, shout out to the financial industry. Her parents were finance industry people. Reading, Pennsylvania too, not far down the road from me. I lived right over there. A few years older than her though. So this idea is she's writing songs. She's got professional writers at the onset. Then she totally goes off and writes her own stuff. Never does the Joni Mitchell thing. Should have been blue, ends up being red. The Bob Lefsetz story, absolutely legendary if you don't know it. But then she decides to come back to working with writers. And because of the success, she punches up and she gets literally one of the greatest songwriters ever who had hits through the 90s and the early 2000s in this guy, Max Martin. And their first song together is We Are Never Ever Getting Back Together. Now, the song and who it's about is interesting because it's about burning a bridge and kicking out an old relationship. But what this fortifies is from that song through the 1989 album, through a whole bunch of stuff that follows, right up into getting introduced to Jack Antonoff and all the stuff that's happening now, is recognizing your career comes to a point where you have to level up partnerships and you have to let other ones go.
Mm-hmm.
And she embodies that so hard in her professional journey of letting some really hard old relationships go and getting into some really nasty fights with some people on the legal and that side over the years with these re-recordings of the albums and all the Scooter Braun stuff. But what's amazing is a song about never ever getting back together is also Taylor Swift's moment of saying, I don't need help. I choose help. And I want to choose the best help I can get to take my craft to the next level. And that song represents that moment, just like so many of us have in our career, of where we reach out to those people 3 steps ahead of us or 10 steps ahead of us and say, how do I get there? It's me picking a job and saying, I want to write, I want to speak, I want to do stuff like this. Michael, you're doing that. How do I do that? Okay, I'll show you. Come over and let's do this. That's such an inspirational message and such an important point. And hey, Taylor taught us.
There you go. I mean, I think she definitely took more ownership during that period of time of her career and her life choices,
took chances. She took chances. Yeah.
And I think, and this is where I'm going to circle back to an advisor. I think, and clients come to you, they want to take chances, especially when they get older and they get their kids get older. What would be an example? Love to hear. Want to make this kind of concrete. What would be kind of a period of time, or could you think of an example of where you kind of worked with the client and they wanted to take a chance and kind of help them reach a more harmonious outcome?
I mean, there's a million.
I know it was kind of a trick question. We didn't plan for this, but we'd just love to hear, because I'm sure in the delivery, there was at least a song in the process.
I got the song because everybody's talking about this song. We're recording this on February 9th, and we're a week, less than a week away from the Grammys, and everybody, because of the Grammys, was talking about Tracy Chapman.
Yes.
Fast Car, the Luke Combs cover that's blown up. Tracy shows up at the Grammys, absolutely devastating. Do you know the story of how Fast Car became like an actual hit? Not just the song, but do you know how it became a hit?
Well, I know she was playing it, and she was at a live concert, and was at Wembley, I believe. And Stevie was supposed to go out, and something was wrong with his keyboard, and so she ended up kind of having to go out there and riff for a good couple of minutes. It was funny when the Luke Combs version came on and around and started getting popularity. I immediately went to our friend Google and kind of pulled that moment up, and I said, "This is the moment." It wasn't one of those moments where you remember everything that's a time stopped or stood still, but you definitely kind of remember, if you heard that song within a day or two, you remember that story. And it was a song that obviously was not about everybody. It was about a specific, woman in a period of time, but it kind of, it had a broad enough meaning to where it spoke, I think, to everybody who heard it at the time. And it was nice to see Luke Combs, totally opposite end of the spectrum. I mean, I think country music gets a bad rap, but at that, I listened to just as much rock as I did country growing up. And I think you can it shows when you're willing to listen past the jingle or the line, and this is much more your territory, you can still find the meaning in the words.
Yeah.
So I have no idea where I wanted to go with that, but I think it came back around as to how impactful that song Fast Car is.
I'm going to take you beyond the impact of the song and remind you of, I love that you've seen this moment, because it's been a beautiful thing to tell people this moment exists and take them to YouTube, but it's just one of those things. Tracy does her set. She's booked for Wembley. The song had come out. I think it's 1988. The song had come out, months earlier, and
To Know Love,
because woman of color doing folk pop music. She's not on the rap charts. She's not on the R&B charts. She's got nothing to do with the alternative charts didn't exist yet. So she actually does her set at Wembley, but this Nelson Mandela concert, it was Nelson Mandela's, I think, 70th birthday party. It's being broadcast around the world. Now, like the Grammys, they don't show the whole thing. They just show snippets of it. You get to Stevie Wonder's set. There's a malfunctioning disk drive in the synth, and he's just like, I'm not going on. Mm-hmm. And the producers go,
what?
Oh. See Tracy backstage with the guitar and just go, on stage now, please.
Yeah.
And she walks out and she brings Wembley to a silence in the most devastatingly gorgeous way ever. And what's so cool about this is she goes from, a few 100,000 people to knowing her, to signing the deal with Elektra, putting the song out. Now maybe a couple million people know her. Now hundreds of millions of people around the world see her blow the doors off the stadium. And I bring that up, and I'm going to connect this to a client situation, but you have to be ready to step into that moment without knowing that moment is going to come.
Yep.
But before she was doing that on stage at Wembley, Tracy was busking on street corners in Boston. She was filling rooms in Boston. She was very successful. A lot of people don't know this. She graduated from Tufts. She delayed signing the deal with Elektra that Brian Koppelman, people might know him from Rounders, Billions, shows like that. Brian Koppelman, founder, got his dad, who was a music industry exec, to sign her. They couldn't get the deal done until Tracy said, I'm going to wait till I finish college. Then we can talk. Fast Car happens. Crickets. Then Wembley happens. World cracks open. So I'm thinking of this time. I'm thinking about Ben Tusky, who's my director of planning at Sunpointe. Ben is ex-Vanguard. He loved financial planning. He needed a path out of that world. It's a message for any of you mutual fund company wholesalers or other people. If you want to expand your horizons, it's going to happen through your network. Jack Dwyer, who's one of my other partners, he's our president. Jack built bridges in Iraq in the early 2000s, sometimes under fire. We're in a family office type setting, and we're talking to this family, and we have our Stevie Wonder keyboard malfunction moment when all of a sudden there's a question about, we're doing multi-generational planning. Somewhere in G3, somebody's getting divorced. And now we got G4 kids and all sorts of other problems in a complicated mess on what to do. And bridge builder Jack Dwyer steps in with all the under fire knowledge he has. And he goes, who's our Tracy Chapman? It's Ben Tusky in this case. We need a planner to come in, fix all the stuff at the ground level first, get them feeling good about the situation, and then we can build off of that moment. If you're not ready, if you don't have the people in that moment, you choke on live TV. But in this meeting, which was really supposed to just be about investment reporting and checking in stuff, this little nugget, this broken branch on the family tree was one of those things where he saw it right away and said, we got to do something with this. These clients matter. The situation matters. We got to add some impact to it. And just knowing in those moments who your people are that you're going to pull in, being surrounded by people that you can pull in with that much confidence and help fix a situation meant the world to the clients, meant the world to us. It was just a great team building experience. And even in the most challenging situations, something beautiful can come out of it.
I would come back, one song hit me.
Oh,
Look, if you had one shot or one opportunity to seize everything you ever wanted in one moment, would you capture it or just let it slip? Sound like you guys captured it.
So what's the song? I'm writing it down here.
Oh, it's Eminem. So I think I guess we unfortunately have to bring this to some sort of conclusion here. Would love to hear, and it definitely, I think one of the things that's made this especially fun for me is just kind of having and listening to your unique perspective. And I say it's unique because I think everybody is unique. This is a business where I think we encourage people to, as one prior guest said, fly your freak flag.
Love that episode, by the way.
It challenges people to be who you are and bring that to the business, because at the end of the day, this is customer service. This is about people want to deal with humans, not AI. And I think no matter how far we advance, some people can say it's advancement in society, but I think people still want to deal with people. And so would love to hear an example that you might have, because I'm sure you come into contact with clients of a whole different range of financial literacy. Would love to kind of hear how you approach that, educating and empowering them.
This is funny because before this, it's a longer story, and it's helping out a very important client of mine, my mother, with something. I actually had to go visit my old high school. And as I'm driving to my old high school, I'm like, if I'm driving to my old high school, I should probably put on something that I would listen to when I would drive to my old high school. So I had Boogie Down Productions. I had BDP on, and I was thinking about their song "You Must Learn," and then I was thinking about Sublime, who I also loved in that era too. I'm writing both of these down. Sublime, and I'm thinking of the song KRS-One, or "I Know Because of KRS-One." I can't think of what it's called. And here's the thing, because I was fascinated by this in high school. So Boogie Down Productions, KRS-One are in New York City in the 80s making this music. And the song "You Must Learn," in case you missed that one, is basically KRS explaining first to his, the Black audience that he's talking to about Black history and culture and the power of this thing that's going on. And then I want to say in the second verse is where it flips to now he's going, like, how are people in white culture going to understand this thing? And the whole song, "And You Must Learn," is him trying to build this bridge between cultures and saying, there's all this overlap. You got to figure out this stuff with each other. Flash forward 5 or 10 years from when that song comes out. And now you're on the West Coast and you have this punkish band out, on the West Coast writing this song called "How Do I Know? I Know Because of KRS-One." And they go through all these lessons that they've learned from this beautiful, beautiful, wonderful man and teacher. And what I love about that is it's this real reminder that, back to the Rubin stuff, you got to get on their level. You got to get on people's level. You have to respect any level of literacy might be present. The smartest person in the world at the fanciest 3 or 4 comma thing, I don't have anybody in the 4 commas, but a 3 comma client can have a less than 1 comma question. And a less than 1 comma question can have a 3 comma question. And you got to figure out ways across the country, across generations, across cultures to say, what's the thing that's going to make this click for you? Or what's the thing that's going to help you express the thing you're trying to express? That's the beauty of music. That's the beauty of curiosity. That's why I think curiosity is the most valuable skill we have as advisors. Mm-hmm. If nothing is boring, if everything is interesting, then we're going to keep pulling these threads to start figuring out, hey, how do you know? But all the time, it's that curiosity to keep going a level deeper with the clients That's where the magic happens. That's what the connection comes out of. That's where you get these beautiful nostalgic feelings of driving to your high school and playing old things that used to be old tapes.
Excellent point. And I think that's a great way to look at it. I really do. I think it's funny. If you really understand something and you're passionate about something, then it doesn't matter how long it takes you to work with somebody to achieve that goal. But I think it's the being able to kind of think of it at varying levels that really shows that you're a master of your craft.
100%. Could not agree with that more. And mastery comes from practice, habit. Yeah.
Yep, it does. So we're going to close it out here today. So at Harvard, we're firm believers in active management, though it's important to acknowledge that every financial expert has their own unique perspective. From your experience, what's your take on active management, and where have you observed it making the most significant difference?
Your kids, Drake fans? You got Drake fans in your house?
I do. I have one.
Okay. He had a hit song years ago called One Dance. I don't know if you remember this song. Brilliant song. And part of the brilliance of this song is, and I promise, like Drake and active management, this goes hand in hand in my mind. So I'm bringing this up. One Dance is a UK dance hit sampling, with Nigerian drums and this whole dance hall overlap thing. And it's a reminder that song becomes the biggest song in the world for basically all of 2016 in the world, like number one on 15 global charts, and just takes over as this global phenomena that is this thing. None of that happens by accident. There is nothing passive about Drake going, I heard this song in a club. I want to sample it. I want these guys from, these Nigerian beat makers to help me put this together with my Canadian friends. And from multiple continents, are we going to assemble this thing? When I think about active management, when I think about what we do in our profession, I remind people of this all the time. You could be a Vanguardian of the galaxy, do all your beta stuff and whatever. God bless you. You put money in, you take money out. That's an active decision all day long. No question in my mind about that. When we think about what we do at Sunpointe with a lot of private investments and alternatives, remind people all the time, like, oh, we make it sound fancy, but it's not fancy. And we need the language to talk about it on your terms. Hey, you own a house? Guess what? You're a private real estate investor. Congratulations. It doesn't trade on the public market. That's why we call it private. You gave a loan to your brother or you gave a loan to your business. Welcome to private credit. Oh, and you own that business? You're in private equity. Congratulations. This stuff is part of the balance sheet that a lot of advisories, a lot of firms, they don't talk about this way. Active to me is the decision-making of all of this stuff around the balance sheet. It's all the decision-makings. It's all the judgments. It's all the choices that you make and how stuff goes in and out via the cash flow statement, on or off the balance sheet, surplus deficits. All the stuff we do in financial planning is an active decision. And when you get into portfolio construction or you get into that stuff, again, if you're adding money or taking money out, it's an active decision. So why would anybody, again, I criticize them. I call them the Vanguardians of the galaxy, not because I don't love Vanguard. I love Vanguard, but we have to understand what passive is for. And that's to give us exposure to stuff so we don't have to muck with it. But even that, we're going to come in contact with, and you better darn well understand the philosophy on how you're going to do this, because it's not as simple as it looks.
Excellent point. Last but not least, how can people find you?
So let's see. Firm website, Sunpointe Investments, personal website, cultishcreative.com, Matt Zeigler, LinkedIn, at Cultish Creative on Twitter. And there's a million YouTube channels and other stuff. Breaking news, Two Quants and an Investor. I'm out there. You can find me.
And I highly recommend Cultish Creative. I think it's very, I spent some time on your site, and it's I enjoy anything where you can kind of see a journey and you kind of get glimpses of people's thoughts and lives. And I think not only is that what we read books, but it's also what we do as a profession. We're interested in people. We're
interested in people. We're here because we're curious. And I am very, very passionate in the next year or so ahead to really lean further into helping people.
Definitely. So thank you very much, Matt. And now we're going to move on to my favorite segment, which I like to call the lightning round, but it's officially called 60 seconds. Let me know when you're ready, sir.
I am ready.
Nickname.
Ziggs.
Hobby.
Fantasy Premier League.
Profession if you weren't in finance.
Be a music producer.
Hidden talent.
Actually an okay cook.
What song best represents your approach to financial investing?
24 Frames by Jason Isbell.
What's the best professional advice you've ever received?
Howard Marks, always find shared values with complementary skills.
Biggest risk you've ever taken?
Thinking that I could talk about all this crazy music and curiosity stuff while growing a multi-billion-dollar RIA and trying to keep conversations like this to 35 minutes or something.
Favorite meal to cook?
Gorgonzola encrusted steak and doing a salad with it with a homemade vinaigrette and everything else.
Social media follow recommendation?
Justin Castellion.
Part of your job?
The people. It's all about the relationships. The people I work with, the people we work for, the families, the relationships. Wealth is not a money thing. It's a relationships thing every day of the week.
Favorite way to get active?
Going for a walk.
Whether you're a seasoned advisor or just getting started, The Active Advisor, brought to you by Harbor Capital, offers professional insights for the financial advisor community. Visit us at harborcapital.com to learn more. And don't forget to subscribe to The Active Advisor on Apple, Spotify, Google Podcasts, or wherever you listen to podcasts to stay up to date on investment trends, tried and tested research methods, and what your industry peers are up to. From all of us at Harbor Capital, thanks for tuning in.
And now, for important disclosures. This material is for informational purposes and is not intended to be relied upon as a forecast, research, or investment advice, and is not a recommendation, offer, or solicitation to buy or sell any securities or adopt any investment strategy. The opinions expressed are as of 9th of February 2024 and are subject to change. The opinions expressed by the speakers do not necessarily represent the views of Harbor Capital Advisors, Inc. The information and opinions contained in this material are derived from proprietary and non-proprietary sources deemed by Harbor Capital Advisors, Inc. to be reliable and are not necessarily all-inclusive and are not guaranteed as to accuracy. This material may contain forward-looking information that is not purely historical in nature. Such information may include, among other things, projections and forecasts. There is no guarantee that any of these views will come to pass. This material may not be representative of the experience of other individuals. Reliance upon information in this material is at the sole discretion of the viewer. This material is not legal, tax, or accounting advice. Please consult with a qualified professional for this type of advice. Investing involves risk, including the risk of loss. Specific companies and issuers are mentioned for educational purposes only and should not be deemed a recommendation to buy or sell any securities. Any companies mentioned do not necessarily represent current or future holdings of any investment products. Harbor Capital Advisors, Inc. does and may seek to do business with companies covered in this podcast. As a result, listeners should be aware that the firm may have a conflict of interest that could affect the objectivity of this podcast. This material is prepared by Harbor Capital Advisors, Inc. Harbor Capital Advisors, Inc. is not affiliated with Sunpointe Investments. All trademarks or product names mentioned herein are the property of their respective owners. Copyright 2023 Harbor Capital Advisors, Inc. All rights reserved.